Hello everybody and welcome to Rulebreaker. Something very different today. I don't usually do previews or news on the channel, but yeah, this one is a little bit too big to ignore. It's the Twilight Imperium Prophecy of Kings expansion was just announced by Fantasy Flight Games, and I've done a little bit of digging around to look for information on what's inside the box and how it changes the game. I thought I'd share my first thoughts with everybody. Yeah, so let's just take a look here. There's the box. Yeah, it looks pretty awesome. It's a pretty big box. It's almost as deep as the base box, and it's a bit more squared, but it looks like it's packed full of stuff, and you'll see some of that stuff now. The most exciting thing for me in the box is the inclusion of new factions. There's 7 new factions in the game. Here's 2 of them that were shown in the promo pictures just as the game was announced. The Argent Flight, the ones in the back there, the bird people, and then the Mahact Sorcerers. And as you can see here, there's all kinds of new components, tokens, hexes, technologies, and heroes, and all these other kinds of cards as well, which we'll have to take a little closer look at now. So the Mahact Sorcerers themselves, these seem to be like these big villain bad guys that are the main focus of the story of the Prophecy of Kings. And yeah, they've got a lot of interesting things going on. Their faction abilities, they involve other people's fleet tokens, command tokens, strategy tokens, like their edict ability here that you can see on the right. When you win a space combat, place 1 command token from your opponent's reinforcements in your fleet pool if it does not already contain one of that player's token. Other players' tokens in your fleet pool increase your fleet limit but cannot be redistributed, which is pretty cool. It's like a way of not only taking tokens away from your enemies, but it makes you stronger at the same time. And then Imperia, while another player's command token is in your fleet pool, you can use the ability of that player's commander if it is unlocked. And a commander is a special type of hero character, or leader character I should say, that we'll see again in a bit. So these guys are like, I guess that's where the Gene Sorcerer name comes in. They must be doing a thing where they copy hero leader characters thematically, and that's what that's all about. Really interesting. And then their Hubris ability, during setup, purge your alliance promissory note. Other players cannot give you their alliance promissory note. So the alliance promissory note is this thing now that you'll see again in a bit. We'll go into a bit more detail. And then they have this flagship, the Arvicon Rex, really cool name. During combat against an opponent whose command token is not in your fleet pool, apply +2 to the results of this unit's combat rolls. Pretty good. And the other main thing that I noticed about these guys was just that they have a different type of infantry, the Crimson Legionnaire. After this unit's destroyed, gain 1 commodity or convert 1 of your commodities to a trade good. Wow, that's yeah, it's interesting. These guys look tough to kill, really tough to take down. They might be one of those everybody against these guys kind of situations going on if they get rolling. Very interesting to see how they play. The other featured race that they showed off in the official promos was the Argent Flight, who are like the opposite really of the Mahact. These guys seem to be like the protectors of the spatial community. They were tasked with stopping these Mahact Sorcerers from coming into our safe galaxy, and they failed apparently. And what they do is as follows. They've got 2 racial abilities. Zeal, you always vote first during the agenda phase. So that is meaning that they kind of dictate the flow of how the agendas are going to go. It says when you cast at least 1 vote, cast 1 additional vote for each player in the game, including you, which is, interesting. So you'll get a bunch of votes if you pay 1, but then the bad thing is everybody else gets to react to that, so you never really make the deciding vote in a agenda phase thing by the looks of things. Next up, raid formation. When 1 or more of your units use anti-fighter barrage, for each hit produced in excess of your opponent's fighters, choose 1 of your opponent's ships that has sustained damage to become damaged. So like an extension of destroyer usage. We haven't seen much destroyer differential in the game so far, so this is nice to see. And you can see there they have a different type of destroyer, a Strikewing Alpha. Their flagship, the Quetzalcoatl, I'm probably saying that wrong, sorry if I am. Other players cannot use space cannon against your ships in this system. So that's the thing that I really like about these guys, is that they're not really affected by PDS fire when the flagship is around, making them very appealing to me, because I have strong opinions on PDS 2. I'd like to see them not so powerful, and I feel like this might help quite a lot. Yeah, and then in Fantasy Flight's unboxing video, they showed a bit more detail in the factions, and they revealed the Nazaroka alliance in a lot more detail. And you can see here, they're like this twin race. They've got like these big cat-like people who are like the soldiers, and these little gnome-like dudes on their backs who seem to be kind of, you know, the brains of the operation by the looks of things. And they've got 2 abilities, Distant Suns, which is a nice callback to 3rd edition, and that reads, when you explore a planet that contains one of your mechs, you may draw 1 additional card. Choose 1 to resolve and discard the rest. So that's 2 words you may not have heard if you are only familiar with Twilight Imperium 4th edition. There's exploring, which is a new game mechanism, and then there's mechs, which is a new unit, and you'll see those in a bit. And then fabrication, as an action, either purge 2 of your relic fragments, again more stuff, but that's all to do with explore. Exploring is the thing that these guys are all about. Of the same type to gain 1 relic, or purge 1 of your relic fragments to gain 1 command token. So basically, when you explore, you have more options based on what you get from your explore, and I'll explain exploring in a little while when we get further into the video. Their flagship, your mechs in this system roll 1 additional die during combat, but if you see the combat on the flagship itself, it's a 9, it's really high. So yeah, remains to be seen how good that is. It's hard to tell without seeing everything and playing as the race, obviously. They didn't really have anything else going on the character sheet, but the dudes, Dane and the guys at Fantasy Flight, showed off some more stuff since, including one of their racial techs, Supercharge. At the beginning of a combat round, you may exhaust this card to apply +1 to the result of each of your unit's combat rolls during this combat round. So that's nice, like a once per round +1, and that could be comboed with other buffs, I imagine. And then the other racial tech that they showed off again later on was prefab arcologies, and that says after you explore a planet, ready that planet. So a nice way to use up some of your resources on planet cards and then ready the planet. Or if you just capture the planet, which may be the way it works, you can ready it straight away and use it right away, which is also pretty cool. They also showed off their promissory note, the Black Market Forgery. An action, purge 2 of your relic fragments of the same type to gain a relic, then return this card to the Nazaroka player. So kind of like what they do, which is familiar to everybody who's used racial promissory notes. That's kind of what happens with them. Purging is essentially removed from the game, so that's what you're going to be doing when it says purge. Just like take stuff you've got and get rid of it to do something different. Then they showed off these guys, who are pretty cool looking. Actually, they're super weird looking guys with their crazy hammerhead shark style heads. The Empyrean, and they've got 3 special abilities. Voidborn, which is nebulae do not affect your ship's movement. So normally a nebula stops your ships when you fly into it. These guys, that doesn't happen. Dane actually said Dane Beltran, by the way, is the lead designer on the expansion. He worked on the base game with the other guys at Fantasy Flight when that came out a couple of years ago. He was saying that their home system is going to be a nebula as well, so that might be interesting. We haven't seen that before. Their other abilities, Ether Passage. After a player activates a system, you may allow that player to move their ships through systems that contain your ships. So that's some kind of, negotiation thing where you're going to be finally allowed to allow players through your stuff, which is pretty fascinating. Normally your ships are like a wall between you and everybody else, and these guys are a bit more fluid. And then Dark Whispers, during setup, take the additional Imperium faction promissory note. You have 2 faction promissory notes, and then that is Dark Pact, which you can see there on the bottom right. Place this card face up in your play area. When you give a number of commodities to the Imperium player equal to your maximum commodity value, you each gain a trade good. If you activate a system that contains one or more of the Imperium units, return this card to the Imperium player. And you've got 2 of those, so basically you're like negotiating and helping other people to get your own way. This is the way these guys feel. And then they've got Dynamo, which is their flagship on the top left there. And I'm sorry about the blurriness of this picture. This is the best resolution I could get from the video that Fancy Flight uploaded onto YouTube for their in-flight stuff and their unboxing video. So some of this stuff is a little hard to read, but I've been able to get most of it. So I'll read it out to you. Dynamo reads, after any player's unit in this system or an adjacent system uses sustained damage, you may spend 2 influence to repair that unit. So using influence to repair, I haven't seen that before. And it's hitting on 5s, which is really good. So I'm really excited about these guys. I'm looking forward to seeing what they've got up their sleeves, other than this stuff. And just to mention, they also showed off one of their racial texts, the Ether Stream, which links kind of to the Ether Passage, which reads, after you or one of your neighbours activates a system that is adjacent to an anomaly. So an anomaly in TI4 is any of the red bordered hexes, like the supernova or the asteroid field or nebula or whatever. You may apply +1 to the move value of all of that player's ships during this tactical action. So you can do it yourself, but you can also allow your neighbours to do it. So you're going to be able to barter with people to say, hey, give me some stuff in a trade, in a transaction, and I will let you come through and +1, move around, attack my enemies, attack our collective enemies. So very interesting race. They're real negotiators. They seem a lot more sneaky than their brutish head implies. Really freaky looking guys, but they for dudes who it's hard to tell if they have a mouth or not, to be honest, but dudes who don't have a mouth, they seem to want to do a lot of talking. I was able to dig this image of the 5 faction player mats up from the German Asmodee website. Someone posted about it on Board Game Geek. I can't remember who it was, otherwise I'd call you out if you're watching this. Thank you. And it highlighted some of the other factions that we hadn't seen. Actually, I think that completes the 7 really. It's the Titans of Ul, who I know almost nothing about still. And then the Argent Flight and the Imperium, who we've already mentioned. Then these guys called the Nomad, who are still a little bit of a mystery. And then these guys, these big Godzilla chaps, the Vuil'Raith Cabal. So I was able to, again, the resolution on this was pretty poor, but I was able to figure out what the text for their abilities was. And it's like, yeah, they do some pretty interesting stuff. They're Devour, capture your opponent's non-structure units that are destroyed during combat. Amalgamation, when you produce a unit, you may return 1 captured unit of that type to produce that unit without spending resources. So there you go, right? Like the Devour and the Amalgamation work together, and the capturing is essentially like a incentive to rebuild that unit that you've just gotten from your opponent, but in your own form. And then Rift Meld. When you research a unit upgrade technology, you may return 1 captured unit of that type to ignore all of the technology's prereqs. So, yeah, that's very tricky and interesting. Don't have a lot of thoughts on that right now. This capturing thing, there might be more going on than what I'm gleaning from reading this. Looking forward to finding out more about these. The Vuil'Raith Cabal seem to be also pretty bad guy-like in the story. They seem to be either working with the Mahact gene sorcerers or, yeah, again, a lot of this is kind of speculation, but from what I've read, they seem to be kind of like the bad guys as well, and they look it. They've got these crazy eyes and big sharp teeth. Oh yeah, and then Dimensional Tear is their version of a space dock. It has production 5, but the most interesting thing about it is the system is a gravity rift. When the dimensional tear is there, your ships don't roll for this gravity rift, but other people's will. So, in a gravity rift in the base game, you got to roll, and you have a chance of your ship being destroyed when it goes through it. And then also up to 3 fighters in the system do not count against your ship's capacity. So again, just like a normal space dock there. Dane eventually posted this teaser of one of their leaders on Twitter, and it was Dimensional Anchor, Event Horizon. Interesting. And then the action: each other player rolls a die for each of his non-fighter ships that are in or adjacent to a system that contains a dimensional tear. Again, that's their space docks. On a 1 to 3, capture that unit. So that bleeds back to the Devour and Amalgamation abilities. If this causes a player's ground forces or fires to be removed, also capture those units. Then purge this card. So it's a once-off thing. Wow, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. And when we see the rest of their stuff, hopefully it will all make a bit more sense and be a bit clearer to everybody what they're doing. But this capture thing seems to be essentially kill a bunch of stuff, hold it hostage, and then when you're building your own stuff, it's pretty much free to do it. Is what I'm getting from that. So really interesting race. The other big news was that the game is now 8 players, up to 8 players. So there's a pink player and an orange player. I don't know if I want to play 8-player Twilight Imperium, but the option's there now. Or alternatively, just use these colours instead for various races if you like. That's also fine. You may notice the Mech units, the new type there, the pink guy on the left with the legs. We'll show you a bit more of him in a second. And the other really big thing was this sideboard for the different new units. So there's the leaders and the mechs. As you can see, there's 3 different sections for different leaders: the agent, the commander, and the hero. They're basically like decent, which is level 1. You can see there's like a little dash. Maybe my mouse thing will, a little dash here on there to show that that's like stage 1. And then the next one is stage 2, and then the hero is stage 3, and they're usually the best ones, and they need to be unlocked in a different way. So the Jace X 4th Air Legion guy, Federation hero, you only unlock him after you've done when you've scored 3 objectives, and then he flips over and he has special abilities. So you can see that here. Have 3 scored objectives, and then he flips over to Helio Command Array, and then he has a different action. So really, really interesting. And then this is like the board itself is kind of like the board that you have that has your fleet tokens and your strategy tokens and all that. It just goes on the opposite side. And they showed it off in the unboxing. It's like double-sided. You can flip it over left and right, so you can choose which side you want to put it on, which was nice of them. They showed off some of the leaders, quite a lot of leaders actually. The one that really interests me is not on this page. You'll see him in a second. One of the Hakan ones. But they showed off quite a lot. You can easily get a lot of this information online on Board Game Geek and other places. With the information on the abilities. I'm not going to read through them all now. We'll be here all day. He showed off quite a lot of the Winu stuff in the unboxing as well. He showed all of the leaders. And these are interesting because the Winu are quite highly regarded as being the weakest race in the game because of their strategy of trying to take Mechatol Rex, and how other players know that that's what they need to do and try to stop them from doing it. As you can see from this stuff, they've been boosted up essentially, and I think that was required, otherwise they would be really, really struggling in the mix with the new stuff as well. Other leaders were shown off, like there's one for the ghosts. Showed some of the stuff for the Necrovirus and all of the different leaders for the new faction, the Nazaroka, and then some Jolnar stuff, which was, the guys alluded to the fact that the Jolnar are extremely powerful in the base game, and that their stuff is not quite as badass as a lot of the other things in the expansion, in order to try and draw them back to parity with everything. Yeah, they showed quite a lot. Like the one that I really want to talk about is the Galactic Securities Net, the one that comes for the Hakan there on the bottom right. When one or more of your units use production, you may reduce the cost of each of your units to 0 during this use of production. If you do purchase this card, yeah, like, I mean, that's really good in a lot of ways. I mean, you can reduce the cost of a war sum to 0. This purge thing means you're going to do it once, so it's not like forever. So you're probably going to get, you really want to save this for an opportunity when you've got a big need for a big fleet. And it's because it's the Hakan and because they like to trade, there is the element of, hey, do I really want this fleet? Maybe it's an end game kind of thing, you know, maybe it's like if you do it too early, everybody's just gonna gank you. So I think that's an interesting one to look into. It's gonna affect the Hakan in a really big way. Everybody's gonna know it's there. So trading is going to be a little bit more cagey for them. Yeah, and then the Nazaroka stuff was shown off, Argent stuff, and X-Cha guys as well. And then this big huge image with loads of more leaders was thrown out on the official page as well. So you can see all that stuff in your own time. It's very easy to find it all online. Some more action cards were shown off. There was actually quite a lot of these. It's a huge pile that alters the gameplay quite a lot from what I can see. And then they showed the Alliance promissory note. So every player will have one of these. And the main thing that this does is you're kind of working together with somebody, and the person you give this to is going to be able to use your commander's ability. So your commander is one of your leaders. I believe it's the middle one, the level 2 one. So you can't use the other player's like hero ability, but you can use their middle one. So you're usually pretty good. So if 2 players are allied and they switch these, they can use each other's commander things, or they can, you know, do whatever deals they want to do. There's a bunch of new agendas. This one, Political Censure, is interesting. The elected player, give them a victory point, but they can't play action cards. And then if they lose this card, they lose a victory point. I think the Isarl tribes are a little bit afraid of this one. And then there's more objectives that were revealed. This Darkened Disguise was revealed on Twitter. It's win a combat in another player's home system. So, you know, aggressive. And then stake your claim, control the planet in a system that controls a planet controlled by another player. So get into a system that someone else owns that has multiple planets, I assume, and then take one of them but not all of them. That's how you would get that one. And then have units in the Wormhole Nexus. So the Wormhole Nexus is a new hex. I'll show you that in a second as well. But first, mechs. Mechs are new units. They're like ground forces that jump down onto the planet and get into fights with infantry. They revealed a whole bunch of them in the unboxing video. And there was also a few on the actual promo page, including the Krios one and the Naalu one. Lots of really interesting abilities. At first I wasn't sure how many mechs a player had. I know there's more than one. I think there's 2 each, but that's not confirmed. I couldn't find a solid number for that because it didn't show every piece of plastic in the box, but I think each player has 2, or at least 2 of each one. So that will mix things up a lot as well. Really, really interested in this stuff. One of the ones that I noticed was actually the one that's hidden here. I'm guessing this is the Arborec one, because it's got production on it, production 2. So they have yet another way to keep producing on ground units, which is interesting for them. And from what I could see, they all cost 2 and hit on 6, but if you notice, the Nazaroka one has 2 hits, so they roll 2 dice. So really seem to be quite steady across the board from what we've seen so far outside of the abilities. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what mechs bring to the table. New hexes. There's a whole bunch of new hexes. I think there's 20, if I'm remembering correctly. A whole bunch of, obviously, starter systems for the new races. Like Arcturus there is the Nomad's home system. And then this looks like the Argent Flight home system as well. the one with the 3 planets in it. Yeah, and you may notice their Hope's End from 3rd edition is back, and that has an interesting symbol that we'll get into in a second. Oh yeah, they also highlighted in the unboxing that there's an update to Diplomacy, which has already been in the errata, and essentially what it does is it makes a secondary ability apply to the primary ability, making primary a bit more interesting, where you can refresh some of your planets as opposed to what you did before. And then the construction one is almost exactly the same, it just has a bit of a timing change to the wording, but yeah, it's essentially the same. Yeah, some more hexes were shown off. Perimeter, which you may remember from 3rd edition if you played that, and Archon Veil, plus the Wormhole Nexus, which is this nice double-sided hex here. You may notice the first image here only has the gamma symbol on it, while the other one has alpha, beta, and gamma. The reason for that is when you find it, it only has gamma, but when you send troops in for the first time, it flips over and becomes A, B, and gamma. The other interesting new hex thing is mainly for 5 and 7 players, is the hyperlanes. What these do is they join hexes together that are normally too far apart. So if you have a look here at the 5-player setup, these hyperlanes are like, these hexes are adjacent to each other, so it stops that problem of one player in a 5-player game being miles away from everybody, while another is squashed in with everybody else. So it seems like it removes that thing in 5-player in the base game where certain players based on placement get extra trade goods. I think that's cool, and it should bring a bit more, it's closer to symmetry on the game map. Yeah, the other interesting thing to do with like hexes and stuff was Mirage, which is a token that you can find by doing the Explorer action. And the Explorer action is basically whenever you go to a typical system, you can do an Explorer action and either draw a card from a deck, or you can find special things. In this case, Mirage was shown off as a planet that you can find in an empty system. And it has a special ability, the Flight Academy, which allows you to put 2 fighters into one of your systems that already has your ships. So interesting, really pushes players to go into those blank systems and explore, literally what the name of the mechanism is. A bit more on Explorer, so it centers on the cultural, hazardous and industrial symbols that you know from the base game already, and adds a bit more to them. They've got these fragments that you can collect, and when you purge 3 of them, you turn it into a relic. And a relic, this yellow card on the bottom right, is like a kind of it's like a one-off or a special power, or it's like a good action card or something to that effect. And also this Paradise World is a good example of attachment. So you can see here, this one is if you attach it to a planet, the influence is increased by 2. So like a planet that has like a 0 influence, it suddenly is now a 2 influence. And as far as I know, from what I could tell, if another player steals that planet from you, the card remains attached to the planet itself. And then the Frontier cards are the ones that, I'll just go back to Mirage, you'll notice the symbol is similar. That's just a deck for searching blank hexes, as far as I know. They showed off some lore stuff as well, which looked pretty good. That seems to be a Ghosts of Korea's character being beaten up by one of the Mahact, and that text is way too small to read, and the resolution was too low. But looking forward to digging into that and seeing what they wrote, what it's all about. This is what I call a fast food burger photograph, where something looks very, very beautifully organized and pretty. When I play the game, it's never going to look that organized. And I just thought it'd be funny to show that off, because it just reminds me of those hilarious images in fast food places. And then the information that we got from the sales sheet that leaked a while back was that there's exploration cards, relic cards, 22 standard system tiles is mentioned. Now, I don't know the breakdown of that exactly. I don't know if that includes the 9 hyperlanes or not, or the wormhole nexus. But we've seen some of them, and they seem to be what you'd expect, a planet or an anomaly of some kind. Then there's 13 new agenda cards, 20 new action cards. That's the amount. And then to be determined number of objective cards, and then a whole bunch of tokens. It's coming out in November, and it's meant to be $99.99. So, you know, whatever that ends up being in other countries. I'm pretty hyped for it. I think it's going to be great. They also announced this thing called the Twilight Codex, which is this free like service expansion that's dropping on the website every now and again, and it's going to have kind of like print and play components like cards and tokens and scenarios for you to play, which I had a look at, and I might do a video on that later. It's something free and interesting. But the annoying thing is the content in the Twilight Codex is not going to be in Prophecy of Kings itself. It's something that you have to sort of, you know, get yourself, build yourself, which is not ideal. I personally would pay for the content if it was available in nice shiny form. I don't want to have to print out, you know, technology cards or action cards and sleeve everything. It seems like a lot of effort, but the option is there if you're up for that, and I think a lot of people already are really excited about it. And that's everything I could find so far on Prophecy of Kings. It looks super good, I have to say. Like, I'm really impressed by the diversity in the new factions. I think the idea of the leaders is really streamlined compared to the 3rd edition, which was really fiddly back in the day, like having to remember what each of the symbols meant and remembering which ship had each leader on it. That's not a thing anymore. They're just there, face up on your playmat essentially, and they seem to tie in really well, and hopefully will help balance out some of the obvious gameplay balance things that people have been complaining about for a while. I like the mechs. I like the fact that there is more a higher player count, even if I'll probably never play a player. At least it's there. A lot of people really liked that in 3rd edition and will be excited about playing that in 4th edition. Yeah, I mean, I think they're nailing this one. It was mentioned that you can't take bits of this and just play it. You have to play it all. I think that's great. I think that's really good because it cuts out any ambiguity. Like, I don't like mercenaries, so I don't have to play with them from the 3rd edition sort of stuff. So it's just all in, and by the looks of things, it just really just amps not only the complexity of the game up a lot, but it seems the different types of strategies and types of gameplay that you can get into. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it. I think it goes without saying that when the expansion comes out, that it will be taking over the channel for a while. We'll go through each of the factions and all of the new mechanics, and we'll do it all in detail. I mean, I've gone over quite a bit of it here, but to be honest, a lot of this is speculative really. Like, we're taking guesses at some of the stuff until it's actually there and the rule book's available. I don't want to say, hey, this is exactly how it all works. So there you go. That's everything I could find on Prophecy of Kings, the new expansion for Twilight Imperium 4th edition. I'd love to hear people's excitement and comments and thoughts in the comment section. And if you have any more information, drop it into the comments too for everybody to see, because this is like mining for gold. People are finding things all the time, and I'm excited to see more. So please share. Yeah, so hopefully you got something useful out of this video. You can probably tell I'm hyped for this, excited to do it, and I look forward to talking about it more in the future. Thanks everybody, see you later.